Reporters. NBC's Chris Jancy in a very windy Baltimore where we certainly owe you an umbrella there. Chris, thank you. I appreciate it. Here to talk about all of this, Philip Stutz, former campaign manager of Louisiana's former Governor Bobby Jindal, also Politico's Katie Glick, and Jason Johnson, politics editor for The Root. To all of you, good Saturday morning. I appreciate your being with me here. And with that, Philip, I'll start with you in reading, what came out of the spring meeting with the RNC down in Florida here, where the Reince people are saying, you know what? Kind of veiled at Donald Trump. Whoever this nominee is, we got to unite. We got to support him. But it's interesting when you see that infighting between them and the Republican leaders, of first denial, then anger. So are they at this point now, where we've talked about this before, of full acceptance that Donald Trump will be the nominee?
No, because, there's a good chance he won't be the nominee. He still needs about 58% of the votes. Ted Cruz, what nobody sees in the press is Ted Cruz is in each of these states recruiting these delegates, having one-on-one meetings with these delegates and winning them over. And he's been doing this, he's had this plan for over 2 years now. Trump's been doing it for 2 weeks now. So I think the Cruz people feel very confident if they can create the media momentum out of Indiana, which is really going to be the critical state for him. And that will tell how this goes from that point forward.
Well, absolutely, especially when you have, never Trump, stop Trump movements there, really banking on Indiana as well. Jason, we've heard from Andrea Mitchell, who asked Bernie Sanders this week about how far he'll take his fight for the nomination, and this is what he told her.
If after June 7th, after California, if you don't have a majority, if she has a majority and more of the popular vote, would you then concede, endorse her the way she did of Barack Obama?
Look, if we do not have a majority, I think it's going to be very hard for us to win. The only fact that I think remains uncertain is if we continue to be running significantly stronger than she is against Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee will be. I think that's a factor.
So the read between the lines there could be that, okay, he's not going to take this fight to the convention. So is that Bernie Sanders coming to accept the fact that he isn't going to be the Democratic nominee?
I think Sanders has known that all along. I mean, look, outside of some early contests in Iowa and New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders has always been behind. And I think in many respects he has stayed in this race because, number one, he has a message to deliver. Number two, he has very strong supporters. And number three, he's not going to quit on the people who spent time and money and effort to get him there. But the math just isn't there. And I think he's accepted that. And he knows full well that even if he's polling better than Donald Trump, those aren't the rules. The rules of the game are winning the primary, not winning a general election. It looks like Hillary Clinton right now is winning the primary.
Well, it's also interesting, Katie, when you had the weekend in the New York Times asking whether Hillary Clinton can feel the burn, and the question there was that fine line that we were just talking about of being able to, show the contrast between her and Bernie Sanders, but also not alienating those potential supporters, especially the ones that, when it comes to a general election, she'll need to rally them behind her. How tough is that going to be?
Absolutely. Well, and that could certainly be one of her biggest challenges should she become the nominee. And obviously it looks like she's moving much closer to that. That question of how do you mobilize all of these supporters who are so passionate and are so passionate about Bernie Sanders, some of them getting involved in politics for the first time. How do you ensure that they remain involved and not only remain involved, but come out for the candidate that they've been working against this whole time? But at the same time, there is a sense in Clinton world that depending on who the Republican nominee is, especially if it's Donald Trump, that is going to be a motivating factor in and of itself when it comes to Democratic turnout.
All right, Philip, we look ahead to Cleveland here, and you have the polls that show the majority of voters really want somebody who gets the majority here of votes to become the nominee. The only way realistic, if you're going to do math, and delegates here when it comes to Kasich and Cruz, contested convention. Have they lost it? I mean, you said earlier no, and you see Cruz there getting out there, especially when it comes to spending, hours on end trying to sway these delegates, especially the unbound, is really where he's counting on. How do they go about doing that?
Well, I think the critical number is about 1,200. The 1,237 is the delegate number officially. I think 1,200 is more of the perception number. I think if Trump can get over 1,200, some of these unbound delegates will go his way. I think if he stays under 1,200, the unbound delegates are going to go towards Cruz. I have this wild theory that Kasich and Cruz form an alliance at the convention, and Kasich puts his delegates with Cruz, and they're the ticket. And that may be one of the ways that they do this.
Interesting. We look ahead when it comes to Donald Trump. KDV steps outside of this, new Trump, the disciplined Trump, kind of softer Trump, and starts with the attacks again. Hillary Clinton vowing not to respond to insults Donald Trump throws her way. Here she is on the campaign trail yesterday.
I'm not going to respond to what he says about me. I'm going to respond on behalf of all the people that have been the target of his hatred and his demagoguery. You can disagree with somebody, that's fair game. But to launch personal attacks, to try to intimidate and degrade somebody else is off limits.
All right, so she says it's off limits and she's not going to respond to it. Is that realistic in the months to come, knowing what we know of Donald Trump?
Well, it's certainly a fine line there for sure. I mean, she's saying that she's going to want to respond, on the behalf of the groups that, she suggests that he's perhaps insulted, and at the same time, not necessarily get into this sort of day-to-day back and forth with Donald Trump. Certainly on the Republican side, that has proved to be a challenge for a lot of current and former presidential candidates. A lot of them started off saying that they would never engage in the sort of back and forth day-to-day with Donald Trump, and that was not something that they were able to sustain throughout the primary.
Jason, I know I'm pushing it here, but I really want to get this in. New York Times reporting that Hillary Clinton is looking ahead. Possible running mates here, a whole handful, 2 dozen names out there. Elizabeth Warren. Is that? I mean, could that be a reality?
Not a chance. Look, I think when Hillary met with Elizabeth Warren in early 2015, she Jedi mind tricked her. She convinced her to not join this race. And Hillary Clinton is one of the most cautious politicians you've ever seen. She would never run the risk of having 2 women on the ticket and possibly giving the White House to Donald Trump. She's going to pick a white male from the Midwest.
Interesting, and that rules out Governor Deval Patrick of Massachusetts, another name also being floated out there in that New York Times article. To all of you, I appreciate your time. Thanks for being with me, former General Campaign Manager Philip Stutz, Politico's Katie Glick, and Jason Johnson, politics editor for The Root. I appreciate your being with me on a Saturday.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.